My mother cursed me at my father's funeral, telling me everything he built would crumble in my hands. 6 months later, I found bank statements proving she'd stolen over $1 million from him, and I had to decide if blood was thicker than justice. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Revenge with Mary. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about the moment I had to choose between protecting my mother and honoring my father's memory. If you've ever been forced to pick a side when both choices break your heart, smash that like button and subscribe, because this story will make you question everything you think you know about family loyalty. Now let's get into it. My mother cursed me at my father's funeral, telling me everything he built would crumble in my hands. 6 months later, I found bank statements proving she'd stolen over $1 million from him, and I had to decide if blood was thicker than justice. The funeral was on a gray October morning, the kind of day where the sky feels like it's pressing down on you, suffocating you with its weight. The church smelled of lilies and old wood, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking as I stood beside my father Gerald's mahogany coffin. But I wasn't shaking from grief. I was shaking because I could feel my mother Madison's eyes boring into me from across the aisle, and I just knew that something terrible was about to happen. Madison hadn't spoken to me properly in 3 years. Not since I'd refused to pay off her gambling debts for the 3rd time. My father had always been her safety net, quietly covering her losses, bailing her out of one crisis after another. But when he'd asked me to help, when he'd looked at me with those tired, pleading eyes, I'd finally said the word that changed everything. No. She'd called me selfish, heartless. She'd screamed that I was killing him with worry, that I'd destroyed our family with my cruelty. Now he was dead, a sudden heart attack at just 62 years old. And she was standing there in designer black lace and barely concealed rage, looking at me like I was the villain in her story. The service was painfully small. Dad didn't have many friends left. Madison had driven most of them away over the years with her dramatic meltdowns and constant financial emergencies. I recognized a few loyal faces scattered among the pews. Ethan, Dad's business partner for 20 years, his eyes red and swollen. Sophia and Abigail, old family friends who used to bring casseroles when I was young. And Jordan Green, Dad's attorney, standing quietly in the back row with an unreadable expression. When the final hymn faded and people began shuffling toward the doors, murmuring awkward condolences, Madison didn't move. She just stood there, rigid and trembling, waiting for me. I walked toward her, my heels clicking on the marble floor like a countdown. I was trying to find some word of peace, some bridge across the 3-year silence, something that might honor Dad's memory. "Mom," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. "I know this is hard for both of us, but maybe we could—" "Don't." The word came out like a slap. Loud enough that heads turned. Loud enough that Ethan stopped mid-step and Sophia's hand flew to her mouth. Madison's mascara was running in perfect dramatic streaks down her pale cheeks, but her eyes were stone cold. "You have some nerve showing up here, Megan. Some nerve pretending you cared about him." My throat tightened. He was my father. I loved him. She leaned in close, so close I could smell the mint on her breath, the expensive perfume that couldn't quite mask the desperation underneath. Her voice dropped to a venomous hiss. "You killed him with your selfishness. You broke his heart. And now you'll see. Everything he built, everything he worked for, it will all crumble in your hands. That's my curse to you." The words hit like ice water flooding my veins. The room tilted. I heard someone gasp, maybe Sophia, maybe me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't form a single word in response. What do you say to a mother who curses you at your father's funeral? I turned and walked out, my vision blurring, my hands shaking so violently I could barely grip my purse. I didn't cry, not yet. I just walked faster and faster until I burst through the heavy oak doors into the cold October air. I didn't expect what happened next. I was standing in the parking lot, fumbling with my car keys, trying to remember how to breathe, when I heard footsteps behind me. I spun around, half expecting Madison to continue her attack. But it was Jordan Green, Dad's attorney. His face was kind but serious, and something in his expression made my heart start pounding again. "Miss Andrews," he said gently. "I'm so very sorry for your loss, and I'm sorry you had to endure that." He glanced back at the church. "Your father left specific instructions for me to speak with you privately, as soon as possible. Could you come by my office tomorrow morning?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. The next day, I sat in Jordan's wood-paneled office, the kind of place that smelled like leather and old books and decisions that changed lives. He slid a folder across his mahogany desk. "Your father made his will 10 years ago," Jordan explained, his voice measured and professional. "Back when you just graduated college. He was very clear about his wishes even then." I opened the folder with trembling hands. The legal language was dense, but the bottom line was crystal clear. Gerald Andrews left his entire estate, the house, the construction company, all bank accounts, everything to his daughter, Megan Grace Andrews. I stared at the words, not quite believing them. "Everything. But, Mom, doesn't she get—" "Your father left your mother nothing," Jordan said quietly. He structured the will this way because even back then, he was deeply concerned about her spending habits. He wanted to protect what he'd built, and he wanted to protect you. My hands went numb. "Does she know?" "Not yet. The will won't be formally read until probate begins, which typically takes about 6 months. But Megan—" He paused, then slid a sealed envelope across the desk. My name was written on it in Dad's familiar, slightly slanted handwriting. "He left this for you. He wanted you to read it before anything else happened." I opened it with shaking fingers. "Dearest Megan, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I'm so sorry to leave you with the weight of this decision. I know your mother and I have put you in impossible positions over the years. I know you've tried to help us while also protecting yourself, and I'm proud of you for setting boundaries, even when it hurt. I'm leaving everything to you because I trust your judgment. I trust your heart. Whatever you discover, whatever decisions you have to make about the business or the family, I know you'll do what's right, even when it's the hardest thing in the world. Don't let guilt hold you back from the truth. You owe yourself that much. I love you more than you'll ever know." Dad, the words blurred as tears finally came. Don't let guilt hold you back from the truth. What truth was he talking about? The first 3 months after Dad's funeral were a fog of grief and paperwork. I took a leave of absence from my marketing job to handle estate matters. Madison called constantly, sometimes crying, sometimes raging, sometimes using that syrupy sweet voice she reserved for banks and creditors. I mostly didn't answer. I couldn't. Every conversation felt like walking through a minefield. The company, Andrews & Co., a mid-sized construction firm that Dad had built from nothing over 40 years, was technically still operating under Ethan's management. But I needed to understand its finances before the probate finalized, and I officially took control. Jordan arranged for me to access the business records, and I spent late nights in Dad's home office, surrounded by filing cabinets and decades of documentation. The smell of his pipe tobacco still clung to the curtains. And sometimes I'd catch myself looking up, expecting to see him in his reading chair. That's when I found the first irregularity. It was nearly midnight, and I was going through a box of old bank statements, the kind of tedious work that makes your eyes cross, when I noticed a pattern: monthly payments to Meridian Consulting Services. Every single month, like clockwork, amounts ranging from $8,000 to $15,000. Going back nearly 10 years, I'd never heard of Meridian Consulting. Not once. I called Ethan first thing the next morning before I could talk myself out of it. "Ethan, do you know anything about Meridian Consulting? Dad's been paying them monthly since 2015. There was a long, heavy silence on the other end. "Megan." His voice was careful, like he was choosing each word with surgical precision. "Your father asked me about that about 2 years ago. He thought something was off, but I couldn't find any contracts, any work product, any record of services rendered. I told him he should investigate further, but..." He exhaled slowly. "He said he'd handle it privately. Family matters," he said. My stomach turned to ice. "You think someone was stealing from him?" "I think your father suspected it. But he never told me who. And honestly, Megan, I was afraid to push. I didn't want to believe..." He trailed off, but I knew what he meant. He didn't want to believe it was Madison. But I was starting to. I spent the next 4 months becoming someone I barely recognized. Obsessive, meticulous, half detective and half accountant. I barely slept. I lost weight. My friends Teresa and Abigail tried to drag me out for coffee or movies, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't rest. I hired a forensic accountant named Teresa Rodriguez, recommended by Jordan, to help me trace the Meridian payments. She was sharp, thorough, and ruthlessly professional. Within 2 weeks, she'd discovered that Meridian was a real LLC, registered in Delaware, owned by a woman named Janice Porter. I'd never heard that name in my life. But when Teresa subpoenaed Meridian's bank records, legally, obtained through Jordan as part of estate proceedings, we found something that made my blood run cold. Regular cash withdrawals, wire transfers to personal accounts, and most damning of all, text messages between Janice Porter and my mother, recovered through Janice's phone records after she was questioned by investigators. Madison. Did this month's payment clear? Janice. Yes, your cut is ready. Same place, same time. Madison. Good. I need it by Friday. They're getting impatient. I sat in Teresa's office, staring at the printed messages, and felt the world tilt on its axis. My hands were shaking, but this time not from fear. From rage, from grief, from a terrible, crushing clarity. Teresa's voice was gentle. Megan, your mother was using Janice as a middleman. Your father paid Meridian for consulting services that never existed. Janice took a percentage and gave your mother cash. It's textbook corporate fraud and embezzlement. She slid another document across the desk, a financial summary. Over the course of 10 years, Madison had stolen approximately $1.2 million from my father's company, $1.2 million, while he worked 70-hour weeks. While he missed vacations and family dinners. While he aged 10 years and 5, the stress literally killed him. I didn't sleep for 3 days after that. I kept reading Dad's letter over and over. Do what's right, even when it's the hardest thing in the world. Don't let guilt hold you back from the truth. Part of me, the daughter who remembered being small and holding her mother's hand, who remembered lullabies and birthday cakes, wanted to bury it. To protect the family name, to avoid the scandal, the shame, the permanent fracture. But another part of me, the part that remembered my father's exhausted face, his worry lines deepening year after year, the way he'd clutched his chest that final morning, that part knew exactly what I had to do. I called Jordan. My voice was steady. I want to file a criminal complaint. There was a pause. Megan, he said carefully, are you absolutely certain? Once you do this, there's no going back. This will destroy your relationship with your mother, permanently. She cursed me at his funeral, I said quietly. She stole from him for a decade while he worked himself to death trying to provide for her. The relationship is already destroyed, Jordan. It's been destroyed for years. I was just too afraid to admit it. Then I'll help you do this the right way. The district attorney's office took the case immediately. White-collar fraud, elder financial abuse, wire fraud, conspiracy. Madison was facing multiple felonies with potential prison time. When detectives showed up at her door with a warrant, she called me within the hour, her voice a mixture of fury and panic I'd never heard before. How could you do this to me? I'm your mother! Your own flesh and blood. You stole from Dad, I said, my voice shaking but firm. For 10 years, while he trusted you, while he loved you, while he died trying to keep everything afloat. I had debts, Megan. Dangerous people. I had no choice. My throat tightened. You had a choice every single month for 10 years. Every single time you took that money. You chose yourself over him, over us, over everything. She broke down then, sobbing, begging me to drop the charges, promising she'd pay it back, promising she'd change, promising everything she'd promised 100 times before. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. Dad had asked me to do what was right, even when it was the hardest thing in the world. This was the hardest thing in the world. The legal process took another 8 months. Madison's attorney eventually negotiated a plea deal. She would plead guilty to reduced charges, serve 2 years of supervised probation, perform 500 hours of community service, and make full restitution to the estate. That meant surrendering all her remaining assets, including the house her own mother had left her, the only thing she'd never managed to gamble away. The court supervised the entire transfer. Every dollar accounted for. Every asset is documented. It wasn't revenge, it was justice. The day the restitution was finalized, I drove out to the cemetery alone. The spring air was soft and clean, washed by recent rain. Everything smelled new. I knelt beside Dad's headstone and traced his name with my fingers. Gerald Thomas Andrews, beloved father. I did what you asked, I whispered, my voice breaking. I chose truth over comfort. I chose what was right, even though it was the hardest thing I've ever done. I hope you're proud of me. A breeze stirred the grass around me, gentle and warm, like a hand on my shoulder. And for the first time in over a year, I felt like I could actually breathe. 2 years have passed since that day. Andrews & Co. is thriving now. I rebuilt it with Ethan's help, brought back talented employees Dad had been forced to let go during the lean years, expanded into sustainable building practices Dad always wanted to explore. We created a scholarship fund in his name for kids studying architecture and construction management, something he always dreamed of doing but never had time for. Madison completed her probation and moved out of state. We haven't spoken since the sentencing. I don't know if we ever will. Sometimes, late at night when I'm closing up the office, I wonder if she ever thinks about the curse she threw at me. If she ever realizes it came true, but not the way she intended. Everything Dad built did change hands, but not to ruin, to rebirth. I drive past our construction site sometimes and see his name still carved on the project signs. Andrews & Co. building tomorrow. And I smile, because I know in my bones he'd be proud. Proud that I chose the truth. Proud that his legacy stayed with someone who loved him more than money. Sometimes I still hear her voice echoing in my memory. Everything will crumble in your hands. Maybe something did crumble that day in the church. My fear of her. My need for her approval. My guilt over setting boundaries. And in the place where that fear used to live, I found something my mother could never steal. Never gamble away, never destroy. Peace. All right. I need your honest opinion on this one, because I still wrestle with it sometimes. Was I right to prosecute my own mother? Should I have just let it go to preserve what was left of our family? Here's how I see it. If she'd stolen from a stranger, she'd be in prison. If she'd embezzled from any other company, she'd have a criminal record. The only reason anyone questions my decision is because she's my mother. But does being family give you the right to commit crimes without consequences? Does love mean protecting someone from the results of their own choices? I don't think so. I think real love, the kind my father showed me, means holding people accountable. It means saying, I love you, but I won't enable you. I won't cover for you. I won't sacrifice my integrity to protect you from yourself. My father spent 10 years knowing something was wrong, but too afraid to confront it because she was his wife. And that fear, that misplaced loyalty, literally killed him. The stress, the worry, the financial strain, it ate him alive from the inside. I refuse to make that same mistake. But what do you think? Drop a comment and let me know. Is family loyalty more important than justice, or is holding people accountable the highest form of love? And be honest, because I want to hear the arguments on both sides. If this story made you think, if it challenged you, if it reminded you of your own impossible choices, hit that subscribe button and join the Revenge with Mary family. Because the hardest stories to tell are the ones we need to hear most. And remember, sometimes the best way to honor someone's memory isn't to preserve the peace. It's to fight for the truth they deserved while they were alive. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.